I guess we can get started. If the pinball machine gets loud, I'm going to... Oh, you already got the door. All right, cool. And I know it can get warm in this room. I've had some sessions I've sat in. Hopefully that fan's enough. All right, I think it's recording already. So this session is R.E.A.D, how to select the right modules. R.E.A.D is a really nice acronym. We're going to go through what it means, and hopefully it'll be a good session. I congratulate you guys for making it to the end and coming to the last session of the day, especially coming to my session. I really appreciate it. So, who am I to start out with? My name is Michael Miles. I live and work in Boston, Massachusetts. Question?
I was promised beer at the last session.
If you... Yeah, all right, we can make that happen, sure. I could probably use one right now. So I live and work in Boston, Massachusetts, on the other side of the country. I am the Associate Director of PHP for a company called Genuine. We're a full-service digital agency. That's a lot to say. It means we do brand engagement, SEO, UX, design, development, video production, interactive applications, and then development in .NET, front-end, and PHP technologies, which is what I do. So we do a lot more than just Drupal. We're not a Drupal dev shop. And we have offices in Boston, that's our home office. We have an office in New York City, in Chicago, and one in San Francisco right across the way. I've never been to it, but I bet it's pretty good. It's not as good as the Boston one, though. I've been working with Drupal since 2008, and I've done everything under the sun when it comes to working with Drupal, from just having to sit there, put content into a brochure website, to building themes, modules, and helping to architect and deploy large-scale global platforms on Drupal. I am an R.E.A.D Grand Master, which means I've passed 3 R.E.A.D exams, and I was named a 2014 R.E.A.D MVP for the work that my team did, as well as myself, but they needed a name for the award, and so I graciously said, yeah, you can use mine, it's no big deal. If you want to know any more about me, you can find me on Twitter at MikeMiles86. You can find me on Drupal.org at MikeMiles86, where I maintain a handful of modules. Anywhere online, I'm MikeMiles86, except for my website, which is mike-miles.com. So, yeah, you can find more information about me on there. So, goals of this session. I have 3 goals. First one is to outline the steps that you should be using to decide if you have to use a contrib module, a patch contrib module, meaning either a patch provided by the community or one you have to write yourself, or you just have to buckle down and write your own module for your functionality needs. I want to demonstrate to you the 4 steps that I'm going to outline of R.E.A.D, and I'm going to use a real-world example, a scenario to do this. So after each step, we're going to go through and see how to apply that step. And then ultimately, I want to teach you guys the habits for making the right module decisions. And we'll see why that's important. And when I learned I was giving my session the last spot on the last day of the conference, I decided to add a 4th goal, and that's to keep you awake, because you've learned a lot. And over this one weekend, I'm sure it's a lot to process, so I'm going to try to keep you entertained as well. So what this session is all about is really how to make smart, timely, and informed decisions. It's not necessarily about how to pick the right module, though that's the ultimate goal. But it's about making these decisions because every project, whether you're building something for yourself, for a client, for your company, has 3 constraints. It has a timeline, a budget, and a scope. And if you know what functionality you're supposed to build and you make the wrong decision, you're going to blow out one of these pieces. And I'm sure no one here has ever done that, but it can happen. And that costs you, that costs your company, that costs your reputation, and you want to make sure you make the right decision the first time so you don't do things like inherit technical debt. There was a good session yesterday on technical pollution, which is a nice little coin term for technical debt. And if you pick that you're going to build a custom module and you blow out your timeline, so you have to cut a bunch of corners to make it fit, you're going to inherit a bunch of debt, and that's going to cost you in the long run because you're going to have to fix those problems eventually. So that's where R.E.A.D comes in. So R.E.A.D is 4 steps to follow that I've noticed. I've had a chance to work with a lot of smart people. I would like to think I'm one, but I don't think I'm that smart. But I get to work with a lot of smart people, and I've noticed them do the same things when they have to figure out functionality. The first part is to research what exists. This step is how and where to find modules that may meet your functionality needs. Evaluate the options, take the modules you find, and how to figure out which one may be the right fit for you. Analyze the gaps in the functionality of what that best fit module may give you and what you're looking to have it accomplish, and then determine what changes, if any, you would have to make and how complex those changes are. So I'm going to go through each one of these steps, and we're going to see how they work together to help make the right decision for your functionality needs. And like I said, I'm going to have a real-world scenario, so Badcamp presents a real-world scenario. At the end of each step, we're going to follow our hero, the Drupalist, as he's given a set of functionality and then has to make a decision on how to accomplish it. So research what exists. Like I said, this step is all about how and where to find the modules that meet your needs. It's about understanding what you're being asked to build and then how to find quickly what may already exist to let you build it. And the first part of this is to isolate functionality keywords. No matter what sort of workflow you're working with, if it's agile or waterfall, you're given some sort of documentation, tech specs, emails from a client, notes from a meeting. You want to gather all this information up and start looking through it and reading it and making sure you really understand what you're supposed to be building. You want to ask any questions about the assumptions you have about what you have to build after reading all this documentation. Assumptions are really bad. At least in my experience, when you make an assumption, you end up building the wrong thing, and you end up going for the wrong end goal. I like to take my documentation and specs and notes and whatever I have from my client and rephrase what they're asking for in a simpler way. I usually say, given I am such a user, when some event occurs, then I expect a certain outcome. And rephrasing your functionality requirements in that way and asking the client, is this what you're looking for? You both can get on the same page and really understand what you really want to build or what you're looking to accomplish. And so when you go through all these documents, highlight, circle, mark any unique nouns and verbs. You want to strip out all the fluff that is being described to you about what a client wants and just really figure out what you need to manipulate and how you need to do it. Now, with those keywords, you then perform searches. And this is at the beginning because searching is cheap. Development is expensive. Who here would consider themselves a developer? All right, who here of those developers, who here considers themselves a lazy developer? I do, yeah. Wow, more hands? I don't get how that works. As developers, we know our first tool is to search because we want to see what other people have done for us instead. And that's the great thing about Drupal. And I always tout this. Since Genuine, we don't just deal with Drupal. We're not a Drupal dev shop. When I have to talk to clients about what may be the best fit for them and why Drupal may be a good fit for their project, I always state that the community is one of the best pieces of Drupal. So on Drupal.org today, there are over 30,000 available modules. This means whatever you're trying to build, someone's already done it. There are a lot of smart people out there. So if you can extract your problem and your functionality, then you can probably find a module on Drupal.org that does something of what you need. And you can be lazy. You don't have to do it yourself. Go to your favorite search engine and search Drupal followed by one of your keywords. This is going to give you really specific results. Usually it links to module pages on Drupal.org or a discussion or a blog post. Resources you can quickly use to find a list of modules. And then finally, Drupal.org has a search interface itself. Obviously, searching on Drupal.org is only going to give you Drupal results. You can even just filter on modules and quickly get a list that you can view that may be modules that meet your needs. And then like I was saying, the community is very important in Drupal. It's a very big, powerful tool in Drupal. So utilize the community to let them help you figure out how to build what you want to do. Drupal's big on using IRC, Internet Relay Chat. There are two channels especially, Drupal and Drupal support. If you're trying to figure out how to build out your functionality, go on these channels and ask a question saying, hey, I'm trying to accomplish this. Has anyone done it before? And you're going to have people who ask you follow-up questions and who ultimately want to give you suggestions on how to do it, what modules you can use. Go to your favorite social network and find the Drupal group. Every social network I'm a part of has some sort of Drupal group on it. Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, Stack Exchange, obviously. Go there, post questions, talk with the group to see if someone has some insights on how to accomplish your functionality. And finally, talk offline, IRL, meet people in real life at local meetups, camps, and conferences. So you guys are already at a camp for this weekend. You've volunteered your time to come, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people. You've learned a lot of great things. So you're already ahead of the curve on learning how to read. What's great about meeting people in real life, not that when you're given your functionality requirements, you're not going to run to a meetup or run to a camp and then be like, hey, I need to solve this. Maybe the timing may work for that, but usually it won't. But what's great about meeting people in real life is you start building these connections with the community. You go to sessions and learn about modules and methodologies that you didn't know about before. So when your functionality requirements do come up, you can think, I remember going to a session by so-and-so, and I talked to them at the after party at Bad Camp. Maybe I can hit them up and see if they can give me their notes or their presentation and use that as a starting point. So community is really important. So Act 1 of our scenario, research what exists. Where our Drupalist is given requirements, he wants to rephrase them to make sure he understands what to build, and then search and find some modules. So he rephrases the requirements he's given. I didn't go through the exchange of emailing and talking with the client. That would be boring. His requirements say, when saving a file entity, and it's a JPEG image, then the EXIF metadata needs to be captured, mapped to custom fields, and these mappings need to be exportable using features. So he's highlighted some keywords here. File entity, that's a very specific thing. EXIF metadata, that's very specific. He needs to be able to map to custom fields, this EXIF data, and then export these mappings with features. So he's highlighted some of those keywords. And the one he searches on is EXIF. So he goes to he goes to Google, and he searches for Drupal EXIF, and he's immediately given a list of results of potential EXIF modules. So it takes like 2 seconds to get a list of 4 modules. He goes on to IRC, and I hand-built this IRC representation. And he asks, hey, does anyone know how to capture EXIF data from JPEG images? Someone says, what are you trying to do with the EXIF data? And our Drupalist says, well, when a user uploads a JPEG, I need to map that data to some fields. And someone responds, if you're using file entity, EXIF custom might do what you want. And our Drupalist says down at the bottom here, oh, I am using file entities. I'm going to check out EXIF custom. Thanks for your help. And he attributes that person with a ++ to give him some points. So again, real quickly, matter of seconds or minutes, he has a potential module he may use to meet his needs. So the second step is to evaluate the options. And this is when you do your research and you find some modules, how to quickly determine which one may be a good fit for your needs. And this is all about metrics that you can find on the project page on Drupal.org for a module. There's a lot of good information there, and it's stuff you can quickly use to understand that module. And the first part is to gain a general understanding. You do this by reading the module's description and any linked documentation. A well-written description on Drupal.org for a module should tell you what a module does and how it does it. Some modules the description may not, but you're looking for ones that give you that information and answers 2 questions. What does this module do and what does it not do? So what are the bounds of the functionality it solves and what's the goal of that module? And then more importantly, what does this module depend on? What other technologies, what other modules, what other third-party services does this module have to have for you to use it? Ted Bowman, that's his last name, right? I think. I'm blanking. But he gave a talk yesterday on there's a module for that, don't use it. And one of his points is that modules can be complex. And they can do more than you want them to. So that's where the dependencies for a module are important, because if it depends on 3 other modules, that's a whole bunch of more complexity you need to learn and understand to be able to use the module to fit your functionality needs. You want to look at the community adoption. And there's a number of different metrics on the project page on how to analyze this. One is looking at the number of downloads versus number of installs versus the age of the module. Now this metric can be a double-edged sword, and I'll tell you why in a second. But say, for example, there's a module that has a high number of downloads, a very high number of installs, and it's been out for a few years. That shows you that the community is using this module. They've backed it because they're downloading it and people are installing it. Now, if a module's been out for a long time, and like a number of years, and it has a very low number of downloads and installs, that could tell you that the description of the functionality of the module is saying it accomplishes, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do it that well, or the community has found a different solution for it. Now, that can also mean that the module you're looking at is a very specific use case, so it doesn't apply to everybody. But that's why there's other things like the activity of the issue queue. You want to see, are people participating in the issue queue for this module? Are they submitting bugs? Are they submitting patches? Are they asking for requirements or clarifications? Of the people who are downloading and using the module, are they asking those questions? And I think issues and bugs are good for a module up to a point. Because if people are submitting bugs and feature requests and asking the maintainer for information, that means they want to continue using this module despite the issues they found with it. So they're looking on ways that they can keep using it because it does what it's supposed to do very well. That sentence did not come out very well. The issue queue is very good for looking at maintainer activity. This is the final metric I think it's important to look at. Especially their participation in the issue queue. So it's important that people are adding to the issue queue, but it's a whole other thing if the maintainer is not participating in it. Because if people are submitting bugs and the maintainer is not there, those bugs aren't going to be fixed. Or if people are submitting patches for new functionality or to close bugs, and you want to and you decide to use this module, and then you have to use those patches, you have to maintain on your site that module with those patches. Every time you want to use that module for that functionality, you have to get those patches, and you have to remember you have those patches, and the maintainer is not going to merge them in and fix it. So the maintainer does he or she accept feedback from the community, what the community wants out of this module? If a bunch of people are saying, yeah, we would like this sort of support on this module, is the maintainer speaking up and saying, all right, I could try to do that, or if someone wants to help me, that'd be great. Or why you shouldn't do that. Or if there's another module that closes that gap for you. And then finally looking to see if the maintainer makes regular commits and releases to their module. And this is important, one, for security issues. Because if you use a module where the maintainer made one commit or two commits 3 years ago and they haven't touched it since, and then there's a security bug that is notified of it, and you're using this on a client website and it's going to expose client data, you're responsible for fixing that. And the maintainer's not going to do it, so you're going to have to spend extra effort and time to fix it yourself. So in Act 2, evaluate the options. Our Drupalist decides to look at the exif custom module that he found from searching on Google and that he was told about in IRC. So he looks at the description of the module, which says basically this module allows population of exif data on file entities, and you can create mappings between fields in exif data. Sounds a lot like the functionality requests that our Drupalist had. He looks at the community adoption. It has very low downloads, 4,000, a low number of installs, 475, and it's been out since 2012. However, this module is very specific. Not everyone needs exif data on their site. It's not the views module that everybody needs. But people who do use it are participating in the issue queue. There are issues, there are feature requests. So that's a good sign that people who do use this module are actively using it and want to keep using it. He takes a quick glance at maintainer activity, starting at the issue queue, and he notices that half the issues have been closed and the bugs have been closed. So the maintainer is closing issues and he's working with the community. The status in the module says it's under active maintenance. and under active development, and his commit history up in the top left backs that up. He's made 23 commits in the last 2 years, so that's almost 1 commit a month. So that tells our Drupalists that this maintainer is pretty active with this module. So it may seem like it's a good fit. Are you guys still awake? We're halfway through. All right, great. Everyone turn to your left. Everyone turn to your right. If you see anyone not paying attention, just nudge them a little bit. Take this intermission to say I have stickers. So if you want genuine stickers, you can come grab them after. They're really fun. I didn't design them, but my work didn't have stickers, and I wanted stickers, so I ordered them myself. All right. Good, you're still awake. So step 3, analyze the gaps. This is after you have looked at a module and determined from the metrics it may be a good fit for you, and determine what it does versus what you need it to do, and where there may be any holes in the functionality. The first thing you want to do is to test the module. Very important that, well, for me it's very important that I get to play with the module. I can watch videos, I can read blog posts, tutorials, but until I get to put my hands in it and really see it, I don't really understand what it does. So use a sandbox. I like simpletest.me. If you guys have never been to that website, what you can do is you go to simpletest.me, you put in the name of a module that's on Drupal.org, and you'll spin up a Drupal site with that module and all its dependencies. You get about a half hour of time to play with this module with an admin login, all for free. And that's great because you can use that to quickly determine what's offered out of the box by that module. And that's the goal of testing it, is you want to see how does it meet your needs. How does out of the box, how are you able to configure it out of the box to meet what you're looking to accomplish? Now you don't have to use simpletest.me. Maybe you want to use your local environment, maybe you have other modules you want to make sure it works well with, or a custom theme or something. So you can do that. Whatever you want to use that allows you to quickly install the module and play around with it. Time box yourself. I like a half hour to an hour of time depending on the complexity of my issues, my functionality requests, and just see what you can get it to do. And in playing with it, you're going to see what's missing. You're going to determine the missing functionality. What does this module not do for you? And this is important to figure out what of your functionality requirements aren't met. Because if there's a gap, is it a 20% gap or an 80% gap of functionality? And this is very important because the bigger the gap, the more effort it's going to take for you to close it. If a module only accomplishes 20% of what you need it to do, that means you're going to have to get other modules to close that 8% of functionality, or you're going to have to then figure out when you're going to determine your changes, how much code you have to write yourself, and that all adds to the amount of effort and time and budget you have to spend to close those gaps. So you may want to then look for another solution, another module that gets closer to your functionality needs. So the bigger gap, the larger amount of effort. So ideally, you want to find a module that has a small gap, or really ideally no gaps at all. Because if you find a module and you test it and it does everything you want, great, you're done. You have a module to use the contrib module. If you do find gaps, hopefully they're small ones, go back and use the Drupal community. Again, we're all open source technologists. We all come to conferences on the weekends to talk and meet with each other. We want to help each other out. We want the community to grow. We want each other to grow. Go back to the issue queue for the module. Search to see if anyone has come across your missing piece of functionality as well. Go back to your favorite search engine and search Drupal, followed by the module name, followed by the piece of functionality you're looking for. I do this a lot. I do this all the time. Mainly when I'm writing modules, but it works when you're trying to close a gap. See what gaps you can close with the community's help, because again, that allows you to be a lazy developer, and it's work you don't have to do, and that saves your budget and your time. Especially if it's a patch submitted to the module, then maybe it'll be merged in, and then you just need the module itself, and you don't have to worry about maintaining that and QAing that and using your resources. So Act 3, analyze the gaps. Our Drupalist, he did a search. He analyzed exit custom. It sounded like it may meet his needs. It looks like it's pretty well maintained and it's active. So he wants to test it and see what it does. So he downloads the module into his sandbox environment. He's quickly able to determine that It shows a list of the exif fields, and he can map them to his file entity fields, and then he can upload a file, and he can see that the exif data is copied to the right fields that he's mapped. That's great, that's what he wants. But then in playing with it, he discovers there's no feature support. And this is important because our Drupalist needs to be able to make these mappings not only in his environment, then push it up to production, give it to other developers. And if there's no feature support in Drupal 7 for this, he's going to manually have to make those mappings or tell others how to do it. And there's going to be a lot of issues with that. People are going to do it wrong. It's not very useful. So he goes to the community and he goes to the issue queue, and features is a very broad use case. So he searches on features and he finds nothing in the issue queue. There's no one's asked about feature support. Not surprising, since it's a small community of people who use this module. So with this gap, our Drupalist is going to have to determine what changes he's going to have to make to close it. And this step is asking yourself a bunch of questions on what work you have to finally put in to close the gaps that you have with a potential module. And it is warm in here. The first part of this is to review the module's code. What's important is to see, does this module's code follow coding standards? And that's important. Coding standards are in place for readability purposes. If, in Drupal 8, it's going to be a lot harder to write modules that don't follow standards. But in Drupal 7 and before, you could go into a module, look at the code, it could be spaghetti code. And you may not know what does what. You want to see, does the code use core APIs, core hooks? Can you extend it some way to close your gap? If it doesn't use those things, it's going to be a lot harder to close the gaps you found. So, right, is this Unix? Can I sit down and save myself from the raptors? Do I understand the system? Can you understand how the functionality works, and can you quickly do that? And that's going to help you evaluate what changes you have to make to the existing code. So you have to rewrite a whole bunch of code provided in the module. It's hard to rewrite someone else's code, especially if you have to change a lot of it. You don't have the mindset that that person had when they wrote it, so you're not going to know all the impacts of the changes you're making. So it's better if you have to make changes that extend the module. And by extend, I mean you're adding additional functionality to what it does. Do you have to just add some code to make it close your gap and change, and add functionality to close your gap? Or do you have to write code that's going to alter what that module does to close your gap? Are you going to make it do something else and change the goals of that module? That's important because if you change the goals of a module and you make it do something different, you alter it what it seeks to do, you're writing code for a different use case. You're writing a different module. So why would you use somebody else's and change theirs around? You then have to estimate the effort. How complex are the changes you would have to make? Do you have to re-architect the database structure that module uses? Do you have to change how it's creating entities or some other piece of functionality? Do you have to make a lot of complex changes to close the gaps that the module has? How confident are you that you can make these changes? Now, it's okay if you are not, especially if you're a beginner, it doesn't even matter if you're a beginner. If you're not confident in the changes that you need to make, then don't make those changes. Don't be subject to your own ego to be like, oh yeah, we have enough time. I don't know how to do this, but we have enough time to do it. Because then you're going to fail, and you're going to blow out your budget or your timeline or your scope. And is there enough time to make the changes? So are you confident enough that you can change what you need to? And do you think you have enough time to do that? If you don't have enough time, then it won't be worth the effort to close the gap in that module. You may want to find a different solution, or it may be worthwhile to write your own module. So Act 4, determine the changes, in which our Drupalist is going to look at exif custom and see what would he have to do to add feature support. So he reviews the code. It's written pretty well. It mostly follows Drupal coding standards. And most importantly is our Drupalists can see how those mappings between exit data and file entity fields are being saved to the database and how they're being retrieved. I didn't know a good way to show it, but he does see that there's something he would have to change. I think I do it, yeah. In the changes, he knows he has to add feature support. That's adding to what the module does. He's not changing what it seeks to do. But he would have to add a machine name to the database table because he notices in the database structure that everything is stored with serial IDs. And if you've never had to export something with a serial ID to other systems, it does not work. They're not good for transporting. So he thinks maybe I'll add a machine name to the database table, but that change isn't altering what the module does. I'm still just extending what the module does. Because it's still gonna, I'm not changing how it maps fields. I'm not changing how those fields are saved and stored. I'm just adding a little piece of information so it's easier to export them with features. Our Drupalist then estimates the effort that it would have to take to close this gap. The changes you'd have to make to the module itself are very small. You'd have to add that new column in the database, add an update hook so that it could be applied, and then add the code so the machine name is being saved with the mapping. He takes a look and knows there's a lot of features documentation out there. He's confident that he can make the code changes. Maybe he's done it before, or the documentation, it's only like 4 hooks he would have to use. It's like 70 lines of code to add it. So he's confident he can do it, and there's enough time to make these changes in. So finally it comes down to making the choice. What to do with all the data you get by going through the steps of R.E.A.D. Following the steps, there are going to be 4 potential solutions you're going to end up on. The first one is you're going to do your research with your keywords. You're going to find some potential modules. You're going to pick one that may be a good fit. You're going to play with it and see there are no gaps. So you're going to use that module as is. You're done. It's easy. You may play with the module and find a small gap and then find out that the community has closed that gap either by another module or a patch or some other solution, and you're going to use the contrib module with that community solution, because then you don't have to do the work. Or you're going to find that there's a gap that's small enough where it's not that complex. It doesn't ultimately change what the module seeks to do, so you're going to write your own little patch to make that small change. Or you're going to do your research, not find anything. Do your research, find something that looks like, do your research, find modules, but eliminate all of them because you don't think they're a good fit. Or you're going to find one that's a good fit, check out the gaps, and see that there are huge gaps in functionality, or you'd have to make a lot of changes to what that module seeks to do, so you might as well just write your own custom module. So this is best demonstrated with a flowchart, and I'll make it bigger. This really simplifies the steps of R.E.A.D. into 4 or 5 simple questions to ask yourself. So research, can you find modules? If you can't find any modules from your research, build a custom one. If you do find modules, evaluate them. Can you find one that seems like a best fit based on metrics? If you can't, build a custom one. If you can, analyze it. Are there any gaps in the functionality from playing with it? If there are no gaps, then great. Use that module. It does what you need to do. You're done. Easy. If there are any gaps, see, are there community solutions that exist? If there are, use those community solutions. Again, it's work you don't have to do yourself, work you don't have to maintain. If there are no community solutions, then determine, do you have to make complex changes to this module to close those gaps? If the changes you'd have to make are small and not complex and they don't alter the module too much, write a patch. But if they're complex changes and you're going to change what that module does, you might as well just write your own custom module. So the one thing, and I haven't figured out how to fix this on this chart, it makes it look like to me that you're going to be building a custom module a lot. But in reality, in my experience, it breaks down like this. I don't have any strict numbers for here, but the majority of the time you're going to be using a contrib module. Either most of the time on its own, because again, there are 30,000 modules out there. There's going to be one that does what you need to do. Or you're going to find one with a small gap, you're going to use a community solution because someone's already come across that problem and solved it. Or there's a small gap and you can't find it, so you're going to use a contrib module with your own custom patch, which Hopefully, if you're a good member of the community, you submit back if it's useful. And the smallest amount of time will usually be writing a custom module, unless you have a very specific use case and you can't find anything. You should be able to find stuff that already exists. Now, for Drupal 8, I think this is going to change over the course of the next year. As people are starting to build on Drupal 8, and we have Drupal 8 release, I think you're going to see websites on Drupal 8 faster than you see modules ported to Drupal 8. So the way I see this changing, and I challenge you, if you follow the steps of R.E.A.D, if you feel confident enough, I think that contrib modules with a community solution is going to grow, and contrib modules with your own patch are going to grow. And you're going to have to do that a little bit more. Especially if you find a module that you really want to use. It sounds like it meets your needs, but it's only for Drupal 7. If you're confident and you have the budget, you think you can do it, write a patch, and this is going to go against what I said, but write a patch that's complex, that's a port to Drupal 8 for that module, and then submit that patch back to give the maintainer a starting place to encourage them to officially bring that module to Drupal 8. That's the challenge I have out for you. So Act 5 of our real world scenario, making the choice. Our Drupalist has gone through all the steps, and he follows his flowchart. Did he find modules that meet his needs from his functionality keywords? Yes. A couple of exif modules. He evaluated them. Did he find one that's a good fit? Yes. Exif custom sounded like a good fit. He analyzed it, played with it. Was there a gap in functionality? Yes, there was. There was no feature support that our Drupalist needs. He checked the community. Were there community solutions? No, there were not. Nobody has solved feature support for exif custom. So he analyzes and he determines the changes, would they have to be complex to add feature support to this module? No, they would not be complex changes, so he's going to write a patch. So he just followed the flowchart and he got to patch solution. And that's what he does. Being a good member of the community, he also writes it in a way that he submits it back to the module's issue queue, saying, hey, I like this module, it does what I need, but I need feature support, so I wrote a patch that does it. And the maintainer then merges that patch in, and now exif custom has feature support. So R.E.A.D. What is it? Well, reading is awesome. That's what it is. But it's 4 steps that you can use, and it's not just at the time when you have to start building, but either if you're doing waterfall methodology where you have to do like a functional specification or some sort of budget, you can quickly determine what you would have to do and figure out that cost. Or if you're doing agile and you're doing your backlog grooming or your sprint planning, use your stories and figure out what you'd have to do and how many story points or how much time that story is going to take you. And so that's where they're really helpful, and I've seen a lot of people use these steps to solve those problems. So again, it's research what exists, evaluate the options of the modules you find, analyze any gaps in your best fit, and then determine what changes you'd have to make to any of the gaps you found. So following these, you're going to reduce your tech debt, you're going to reduce the time that takes you to implement a solution, and you're going to, not all the time, but majority of the time, make the right choice. And I think this is just like learning how to read in general. We all just don't go and read Of Mice and Men when we're like 3 years old. You read Hop on Spot. So if you start following these steps, you're going to make some mistakes, but then over time, it's going to become second nature, and you're just going to quickly be able to do all 4 of these steps in no time and be like, yep, let's use a contrib module, here it is. Or no, there's nothing that exists, let's plan on building our own custom one, or writing a patch. So that's all I have. I guess I kind of went through it pretty quickly, but I have some slides and notes for you guys. A couple of bit.ly links. BC15 read all in caps, the first one, that's this presentation. All the slides are annotated, so you get a lot of what I said. BC15 read slides are these slides, again, annotated on SlideShare. And then the Drupal read link, that's a blog post on my blog I've written that covers these steps and goes into what I talked about. I hope I kept you awake. I want to really thank you guys for coming, spending your last session with me. Sessions for me, when I give presentations, they're always works in progress, so I really appreciate feedback. I give my sessions a lot in front of a brick wall in my office, and the brick wall doesn't give me a lot of feedback, so I really appreciate it if you guys weren't brick walls and you tweeted at me or let me know what you thought, what could be better, or what you liked. And technically we have all the time in the world for questions since there's nothing after this. And I am taking a red-eye back to the East Coast tonight, so I have all night. So if there are any questions, I can do my best to answer them. In the back. Jeff.
As you pointed out, there are 30,000 plus contrib modules.
Yep.
I've seen a lot of contrib modules that they fill my use case 100%, but they also address 30 other use cases that I have no use for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's code bloat that I don't necessarily need. How do you assess that trade?
So that goes back to looking at the complexity of the module and determining its dependencies and what it does. If the module seems way too, like if your use case is one of 30, then that module is going, like you said, it's going to have code bloat, it's going to do a lot more than you need it to do. You may want to look for a simpler solution, or even write a module that does a simpler solution if you don't want all that extra code, and you don't need it, and it's only going to get in the way. So I would say, figure out the complexity, determine, if you want to have that complexity in your code. If you feel comfortable with all that bloat, and like maybe you realize you don't have time to write a module that would do it, you're not confident you can do that, then use that module. You figure out the complexity and see what you're comfortable with maintaining.
How about the lazy programmer's solution that which is steel?
Yeah, you can. I mean, that goes into looking at the code in the module. It's all open source code, technically, right? So do you feel comfortable you can take a piece of that code, rewrite it to something simpler that works for you?
And there was a session yesterday about that. There's a module for that code.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Mark.
Well, so at the tail end of people stepping into contrib development, you start to see a move towards more APIs that kind of address the code builder thing too, right? You end up with an API that then goes in, and then the modules become much smaller on top of it that address the specific use case. 5-star and voting API,
Yep.
It's a very simple example. Where do you see that trend going in the end?
I see that only increasing in Drupal 8, mainly thanks to Symfony, where everything's object-oriented. You write things with classes and services and plugins, and it's the same structure for everything. So once you learn how to write a plugin in Drupal 8, you can write a plugin for anything. You can write a block plugin, a config plugin. So I see as Drupal 8 modules adopt these standards, it's going to be easier to extend what a module does. It's going to be easier to do that because you could overwrite the service and just implement its interface. So I think it's going to become easier thanks to the adoption of Symfony 2 and stricter standards with how to write your code.
Right. And I think, is there some addressing of the code bloat too? When you're
Yeah, because everything, you have to more extract the code out. The modules have to do that, and Drupal 4 does that. And it's not as hard-coded to. This is strictly what an entity is. It's a node, and comments aren't entities. Like everything's an entity. That's extracted out, so you can easily add to that, and you don't have to write as much code, or the modules themselves don't have to add as much code to work with those comment classes. Who wants stickers? Anybody?
Existing module instead of new system.
You guys are too spread out. Well, I can't deliver all of them. Are there any other questions? I did a bad thing and I didn't restate the question.
I was going to snag a sticker.
Oh, all right.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to walk around this way. Cool, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you guys again for coming. Really appreciate it.